Okay, let's dive right in. We have a monumental task ahead of us today.
We really do. This is a big one.
We're taking the very foundations of Western philosophy, Plato, and we're putting him in, well, a rigorous head-to-head comparison with the core liberating doctrines of the East.
Specifically the Buddhist teachings, yeah.
You sent us a fantastic stack of sources for this deep dive, and they really force us to try and reconcile two utterly distinct blueprints for existence, for ethics, for liberation.
It really is the great philosophical inquiry, isn't it? You have these two traditions originating on different continents,
Yeah.
separated by centuries.
And yet they both agree on one fundamental point.
They do. They both start from the idea that ordinary life is, in some way, afflicted by illusion and suffering. And the cure lies in a pretty radical form of truth-seeking.
But that's where the similarities kind of end.
Yeah.
Because when you look at their maps for liberation, the ultimate destination and, I guess, the vehicle you use to get there, they're structurally opposed.
Completely. It's fascinating.
So here's the core tension we really pulled from the sources. On one hand, you have Plato, the architect of pretty much all of Western metaphysics. He builds his entire system, ethics, immortality, everything on the recognition of an eternal, unchanging self.
The soul, with a capital S.
Exactly, the soul. And on the objective reality of the forms, these perfect external blueprints for everything, he absolutely requires a fixed point for ethical knowledge and for eternal life.
And then the Buddha comes along and just pulls that fixed point right out from under you.
Completely removes it.
The whole path to liberation, to nirvaya, hinges entirely on the realization of non-self, or anatta, and on the fundamental impermanence of all conditioned reality.
So where Plato roots reality in this eternal, transcendent, being?
Yes. The Buddha locates ultimate truth in unconditioned cessation.
Yeah.
You get there by recognizing that everything we perceive as reality is just an interconnected, flowing process.
Okay, so our mission today is complex, but I think it's clear. We are going to perform a really meticulous philosophical reconstruction of these arguments.
Especially Plato's proof of the soul's immortality from the Phaedo.
Yes, and then we'll use that rigorous framework to fully appreciate the radical internal ethics of Buddhism. We want to give you, the listener, a shortcut to the profound logic of both systems.
So you can see exactly where they meet, and more importantly, where they diverge entirely.
And hopefully you walk away truly well-informed.
And we'll spend a good amount of time on the dense technical concepts, things like the Platonic forms, the nada, sitta, santana. No. We don't want to just name them.
No, we need to thoroughly explain them, use clear analogies, show their real-world relevance. We need to understand not just what they're claiming, but how the structure of the argument actually works.
Exactly. The logic is the key.
So before we get into the heavy metaphysics, the question of what is real, I think we have to establish the importance of why we act.
Yes, the motivation.
Because both systems, despite their vast differences, really begin with an ethical crisis. It's what we're calling the crisis of unexamined action.
And this is a pervasive societal problem that the sources really highlight. Most people, just generally, lack the tools for any meaningful, deep self-inquiry into their own motivation, their own intention.
And that's not an accident, is it? It's often a necessary structural component of large institutions.
Absolutely not an accident.
Let's call it the institutional agenda. Any large social, political, corporate structure, its first priority is its own survival, its own efficient operation.
Above all else.
So if you're designing a society or a company, you rely on rules and external incentives, what the sources call crowd control, to manage behavior.
Right. And that means any profound, authentic individual motivation. Anything that might lead a person to question the system or to stray from its goals.
It's discouraged or just not valued.
It's just too dangerous for the institution.
Yeah.
You can't have its members doing deep, self-directed ethical examinations because that might lead to, well, nonconformity.
The perfect extreme example here, which really illustrates this dynamic, is the military organization.
It is the ultimate crucible of external control, isn't it? The training is specifically designed to eliminate individual questioning.
Right.
And in certain combat situations, the individual is literally trained to look away from their own personal growth, from their own potential injury, to guarantee that the external aims of the organization are fulfilled.
So structural obedience has to supersede internal ethical clarity for the system to function at all.
It's a complete suppression of the individual's journey toward toward self-illumination.
Okay, so now contrast that extreme example with what we're calling the healing professional's ethical imperative.
Mhm.
Because here, the structural needs of society flip entirely. In any institution that's training or supervising healers, therapists, doctors, counselors, this deep, expanded view of a person's internal life isn't a threat.
It's an absolute necessity. It's the whole point.
If the professional who is guiding another human being through pain and confusion doesn't fully grasp their own motives, they're operating blind.
And they risk violating the deepest ethical trust possible. This brings us to a crucial little nugget from the sources. The danger of altruism.
That phrase just jumps off the page, doesn't it? It sounds like a contradiction.
It does, but it's a profound philosophical insight. It's just so easy for the impulse to service, that desire to help others, to be, ironically, driven by highly selfish aims.
Masking an unresolved ego need.
Exactly. Think about the exhausted, burnt-out practitioner. Why are they taking on impossible caseloads? Why are they continually trying to, rescue clients who aren't ready to be rescued?
Right.
Our source material suggests that often this drive is simply a displacement. They might be deriving their entire sense of self-worth from being the healer. They're using the client's progress or even their dependence to fill some internal void or mask an unexamined feeling of inadequacy.
So the motivation to service is actually an unexamined motivation for self-validation.
Precisely. And that is a dangerous place to be.
And that's exactly where the ethical issue emerges. If the practitioner needs the client to need them, or if the practitioner needs to feel effective just to feel okay about themselves, their actions are compromised.
The motivation has become inverted. It's not about the client anymore.
Let's use a concrete example. A therapist might recommend continuing a long-term, expensive procedure.
Right.
And not because the client is making genuine progress that requires it, but because the continuation of that role of being needed is fulfilling the practitioner's ego.
The ethical breach that results isn't malicious in the way we normally think of it, but it stems directly from that unexamined internal motivation overriding what's in the client's best interest.
The external breaches are just the surface manifestation of these deeper, unexamined internal processes.
Exactly, which is why the Buddhist internal ethical approach is so compelling here. It just bypasses all the external rule modification, the crowd control, and it goes directly to the source.
It's a system built entirely around the purification of intention.
The goal isn't just proper behavior. Like we said, that can be faked, or it can be maintained through fear of consequence. The goal is self-illumination. It's a genuine, deep understanding of one's own motivational roots.
And the idea is that when the underlying driving forces of our actions, our greed, our aversion, our ignorance, when those are purified,
Then ethical interaction with the world just becomes natural.
it's no longer something that requires extra vigilance or constant mental effort. You're weaned away from that exhausting cycle of constantly policing yourself for bad behavior.
Right. The source material points out that once a person finds this genuine inner peace, this clarity of intention, ethical conduct is just a natural given.
This internal work, especially through the Eightfold Path, transforms the practitioner. It provides a constant, fresh, and reliable source of perspective that's rooted in self-knowledge, not some external dogma.
Exactly. And that's why the structure of the Eightfold Path is so perfectly adapted to a therapeutic environment. It's this dynamic, continuous process of self-development. Ethical conduct flows automatically from an internalized, deeply congruent place.
But to really understand its radical structure, I think we first have to understand its philosophical foil. We have to understand the eternal soul of Plato.
Agreed. Let's go there.
Okay, so we're executing the first major transition. We're moving from the ethics of intention to the metaphysics of the self,
We're pivoting to the West and to Plato's dialogue, the Phaedo.
which is the setting for Socrates' final hours. And this is where he provides his definitive arguments for the immortality of the soul.
So we're moving from the question of why we act to the much bigger question of what we are.
The Phaedo is just monumental because in the process of trying to prove the soul's eternal survival, Plato gives us his first really comprehensive account of the theory of forms.
Which grounds his entire view of reality.
Exactly. And as our sources demand, we need to perform a rigorous philosophical reconstruction here. We need to extract the bare logical skeleton of the argument from all the conversational rhetoric.
Let's do it. We can start with what we're calling the executive thesis.
Okay.
This is the definitive one-sentence summary of the argument for the soul's immortality from the Phaedo, as derived from our analysis.
Lay it on us.
The soul is immortal because, as the essence which universally brings the form of life, it is definitionally incapable of admitting its opposite, death, just as the eternal forms themselves exclude their opposites.
Wow, that is beautifully precise. It's dense, but it's all there.
It is.
Now, the context is everything here. Socrates is in prison, he's facing imminent execution, so why is he spending his final hours engaged in this particular line of intellectual inquiry?
The contextual note is essential to understanding this. The dialogue argues that the philosophical life, the pursuit of wisdom and these eternal realities, is actually the ultimate preparation for death.
So he's not afraid.
He is so supremely confident in the existence of the forms and the soul's participation in them that he faces the hemlock without any fear at all. He fully expects his soul, which he believes has been purified by the philosophical life, to just immediately ascend into the company of the forms after it leaves his body.
So it transforms death from being an ending into a liberation, a reunion with true reality.
Exactly. But to accept that conclusion, you have to accept the logic he uses to get there.
Okay, so let's break down that logic step by step. This entire argument rests on what the sources call the metaphysical principle of the exclusion of opposites.
Right. And we should define terms as we go.
Yeah.
We have to start with the fundamental existence of the forms.
So that's premise 1, P1, the foundation of Platonism itself.
E1. The forms exist as eternal, unchanging, non-material entities. Think of the equal itself, the beautiful itself. They are objective, rational patterns that serve as the blueprint for all the things we see in the visible world.
Okay, let's pause right there on that word form, Platonism. Because we use the word form all the time to mean, a shape or a concept. How is Plato's concept different?
It's so much more than a concept. A form is an eternal essence. It's an intrinsic aspect of reality with true being. Think of the form of beauty.
Okay.
It's the absolute perfect standard by which all beautiful things in the world, a sunset, a poem, a face, are measured. It's full of potential examples, but it itself is never changing or perishable. It exists outside of time and space.
Got it. So these perfect blueprints are logically constrained, and that brings us to P2.
P2. Forms inherently exclude their opposites. The form of largeness cannot logically become the form of smallness. The form of unity cannot become the form of multiplicity.
This makes sense. It's a purely logical constraint, but it's happening at the level of ultimate reality. The tricky part is, how does this abstract constraint jump down into the physical world?
That's P3. And it's a subtle but absolutely critical intermediate step, P3. Certain entities in the visible world are essentially and necessarily linked to a specific form, and they carry that form's essence wherever they go. They are the essential carriers of the form.
Can you give us a concrete example of an essential carrier that isn't the soul? Because this is the most counterintuitive jump for me.
A great one is the number 3. It's not a form itself, but by its very definition, it is essentially linked to the form of oddness.
Okay, right.
Wherever you find the number 3, you find the essence of oddness. Similarly, fire is essentially linked to the form of heat. You cannot have fire without heat.
I see. So if fire is the essential carrier of heat, which is a form, then the logic of that form must also apply to the carrier.
Exactly, and that leads to P4.
Which is?
P4. Consequently, these essential entities, the carriers, will never admit the opposite of the form they carry. They must either retreat or be destroyed when that opposite approaches.
So the number 3 will never admit the opposite of oddness. It'll never become evenness.
Or never. If you try to make 3 even, it just ceases to be 3.
Okay, so now we take that entire logical machine and we apply it to the soul. This sequence concludes the whole argument for immortality.
This is the final move, P5. The soul, by definition, is that which brings the form of life to the body, making the body living.
P6, life and death are contrary properties. They're opposites.
P7. According to our previous premise, P4, the soul, as the essential carrier of the form of life, cannot admit its opposite, which is death.
So the conclusion, C, is?
C. Therefore, the soul must be deathless, athanaton, and imperishable.
It's a stunning piece of deduction. He's saying if you accept that forms exist and logically exclude their opposites, and you accept that the soul is defined by its role as the carrier of life,
then you must accept that the soul is immortal. The logic is incredibly tight, even if the initial metaphysical premise is, well, it's a grand one.
Before we move on, let's just briefly define the other Platonic concepts that structure this reality he's building. The demiurge, for example.
Right, the demiurge, from the dialogue that Timaeus, the demiurge is the divine craftsman. This cosmic architect uses the forms, these perfect eternal patterns, as a model to create the material cosmos and, crucially, the individual souls within it.
So that's what gives the cosmos its rational, mathematical, ordered structure.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the philosophical tool Socrates uses to access this reality, to hone his thought and shed illusion, is the dialectic.
And this isn't just an informal debate, right?
No, not at
Yeah.
all. It's a rigorous practice of philosophical dialogue and rational inquiry. It's used to discard false sensory perceptions and allow the soul to ascend toward the forms. It's the training required to see true being.
Okay, so this argument for exclusion, where the forms impose their logical constraint on the physical world, is definitely the hardest word for the listener to grasp.
I agree.
Let's focus on that distinction between objects that can tolerate opposites and entities that exclude them. The sources gave us a crucial passage from the Phaedo.
Yes, the crux quote. This is where Socrates clarifies one of his earlier arguments. Let me read it.
It's-
He says, "You have bravely reminded us, but you do not yet understand the difference between what is said now and what was said then. Now we say that these opposites themselves, from the presence of which in them things get their name, never can tolerate the coming to be from one another."
Okay, let's unpack that in plain English. Earlier in the dialogue, Socrates had suggested that everything comes from its opposite. Something large comes from something small. But here he's saying that's only true for, what, mundane physical objects?
Exactly. A physical stick can be short today and long tomorrow. It tolerates the opposites of largeness and smallness. But the form of largeness, or the essence of largeness, it cannot tolerate smallness. It has to retreat entirely when smallness approaches.
So he's distinguishing the realm of becoming the everyday world from the realm of being the forms.
That's the whole game.
Mm.
And when we apply this distinction to the soul,
The soul is not just a body that happens to be alive.
no, the soul is the essential life bringer. Therefore, when death, the opposite of life, approaches the body, the soul cannot logically admit death. It can't just die.
By definition, it has to retreat or flee.
It flees to its own eternal realm, maintaining its state of being the carrier of life.
The detailed, concrete musician analogy that was in the sources is the perfect way to anchor this idea for everyone.
It's a fantastic analogy. Imagine the musician is the soul. The music is the form of life. And the lyre, or the instrument, is the body.
Okay.
The musician enters the room and brings music to the lyre, making the lyre functional and harmonious. It makes it alive.
And now imagine a destructive force, let's call it silence, which represents death, approaches the lyre.
Right. The lyre, the body, is shattered. It ceases to function. It becomes silent.
But does the musician, the essence that brought the music, also perish?
No. The musician has to retreat. They have to flee when silence approaches. And that proves that the musician, the soul, is separate from the instrument and persists beyond the body's death.
So the destruction of the body is actually the proof of the soul's eternal nature.
Exactly. It's an incredibly powerful justification for dualism, the separation of mind and body, and for the necessity of leading that philosophical life, which prepares the soul for this inevitable, glorious separation.
All right. Now we have to make the philosophical 180.
Here we go.
We pivot from Plato's bedrock, the eternal, immortal self, to the Buddhist doctrine of anatta.
The definitive counterthesis to everything Socrates just argued.
Plato validated the self and demanded its purification for eternal existence. The Buddha, he denied the existence of that fixed eternal soul, the Atman, entirely.
And anatta means non-self. It's the core of his insight. And it's an insight that's reinforced by modern psychological inquiry. If you rigorously examine consciousness, you never find a static, permanent entity.
What do you find?
You only find a rapidly succeeding stream of temporary, fleeting mental states, feelings, perceptions, sensations, volitions. The soul theory, as we saw from the sources referencing thinkers like William James, is a complete superfluity. It's not needed to account for the verified facts of conscious experience.
So the self is illusory. What exists is simply the flow of ever-changing physical and mental phenomena, the skandhas.
Right.
But this creates an immediate dilemma, right? The problem of rebirth without soul. If there's no eternal Atman, what is reborn?
This is where we need to be incredibly precise with our terminology. Our sources really emphasize this. The preferred Buddhist term is rebirth, or punapava,
Which means?
re-becoming, or again existence. It's not reincarnation. That term carries the specific implication of the transmigration of an identical, fixed entity.
And that distinction causes enormous confusion.
Huge confusion, even among long-term practitioners.
So if the identity is not a static substance, how does it maintain itself across the boundary of death and into a new life? What provides the continuity?
The answer is what Buddhists call the causal flow. or citta santana. This refers to the continuous flow of consciousness. It's a concession of momentary mental acts or cittas that are operating so fast we can't perceive the individual moments.
It's like a philosophical version of rapid-fire animation. The distinct frames create the illusion of smooth motion.
That is a perfect analogy. Each moment of consciousness consists of three phases: genesis, development, and dissolution. And as one thought moment dissolves, it doesn't just disappear. Crucially, it transmits its entire energy and all the indelible recorded impressions, the karma, to its immediate successor moment.
Okay, so identity is maintained not by a static being, but by a relentless, uninterrupted process.
Yes, the new life, or even just the next moment of consciousness, consists of the potentialities, the recorded patterns of its predecessor, plus whatever new conditions are introduced.
So there's no identical self.
But there is an identity in process, and it's driven entirely by karma.
And that leads us directly to the candle analogy, the classic illustration used to explain this causal link without a substance identity.
The perfect counterpoint to Plato. If Plato's idea of the soul is like pouring identical water from one glass or body into another,
The Buddhist model is lighting a new candle from the flame of an old one.
exactly. The fire is continuous, the energy is passed on, but the two flames are not identical, and the wax and wick are certainly different.
So what's transmitted is not a soul substance?
It's a stream of conditioned energy, the psychological drives, the volitions, the accumulated karma vipakas, the moral weight of past actions. This psychic energy is what drives the new life, connecting the past being to the future being through cause and effect, but without a fixed entity crossing that boundary.
This leads us to the grand scale implications of karma and the cosmos. We usually think of karma as, an individual moral consequence.
What goes around comes around.
Right. But the sources point out that karma is a powerful structural force that underpins the very existence of the universe.
It acts as a semi-teleological force, a sort of guiding, self-regulating mechanism that maintains and conditions the universe in all its realms. And it's a force arising from the human mind's own decisions for good or ill,
So it's highly creative.
but also highly destructive.
And the most radical implication of this is what the sources call shared destiny. The idea that any particular world, or Lokanov human world, or a heaven realm, it only comes into existence because of the shared karma of the beings that inhabit it.
That's the part that's so staggering. Our collective repeated volitions literally structure our shared reality. The quality of our world, whether we live in an era of peace and abundance or one of conflict and scarcity, is a direct structural reflection of the collective karma generated by all sentient beings.
This assigns human ethical choices a massive, cosmic, creative, or destructive force.
It's a huge contrast to Plato, whose cosmos is structured by external, rational mathematical forms that were established by the demiurge.
Right. In Buddhism, the cosmos is essentially a magical creation, and it's maintained by the cumulative volitions of the beings within it. Our internal ethical choices literally shape the reality we share.
And it connects back perfectly to our initial discussion on ethics. If your unexamined intentions, your negative karma, contribute to this collective flow, you are actively co-creating a suffering world, or samsara.
So understanding and purifying your intention is the prerequisite for liberation, both for you and for everyone else.
Individually and universally, yes.
Okay, now we have to confront the ultimate goal. We've established Plato's eternal being and the Buddha's flowing processes. What does liberation actually look like in these two vastly different realities?
In both traditions, the goal is to transcend our ordinary, conditioned, suffering existence, to achieve a state of timeless, true knowledge.
But the object, or the state they are trying to reach, differs fundamentally.
Completely.
Let's start with Plato's ontology and the ultimate goal, the form of the good.
For Plato, reality is fundamentally rational and mathematical. The forms are objectively true patterns, and the form of the good is the highest object of knowledge. It is the ontological source of all truth, beauty, and being.
It illuminates all the other forms, just like the sun illuminates everything we see in the physical world.
Precisely. So the liberated Platonic philosopher seeks what's called participatory knowing. They are striving to gaze upon this ultimate rational object of true being, and in doing so, aligning their eternal soul with eternal truth.
It's a state of fulfillment through knowledge.
Yes. The Buddha's insight, however, focuses on a different kind of pattern. Reality is indeed rational and patterned, but the patterns are psychological and epistemic. They revolve around human consciousness.
The 5 skandhas and the 3 marks of existence.
Impermanence, suffering, and non-self. Ultimate knowledge, for the Buddha, is the knowledge of these structural processes that you find in your own human
And
experience.
the goal, nirvat, it stands in sharp contrast to the form of the good.
Nirvat is the unconditioned state, asankata. It is the complete and permanent cessation of samsara, that cycle of suffering and rebirth. The term literally means blowing out.
Blowing out the three poisons.
Greed, aversion, and ignorance. And crucially, nirvana is not an object. It's not a transcendent consciousness or a perfect realm of forms. It is a liberation of mind that is death-free, amata, existing entirely beyond the dualities of existence and non-existence, of being and becoming.
So Plato demands an intellectual assent to an eternal object of true being.
And the Buddha demands an experiential realization that leads to an unconditioned state of cessation.
And that difference profoundly shapes their methods.
For Plato, the method is primarily intellectual and hierarchical, dialectic and education. It's a structured, rigorous intellectual journey.
And it's not just about reading books. The education of the philosopher begins with things like mathematics and geometry.
To train the mind for abstract thinking, to get it away from the senses.
Right. Only then can the student engage in the dialectic, that rigorous philosophical cross-examination, which is used to hone thought and ascend toward the ultimate truth of the forms.
And this ascent gives the philosopher a superior, fulfilled life. It makes them capable of governing justly because they have seen the form of the good.
It's the famous analogy of the philosopher king returning to the cave, having had his vision. He has a duty to guide the contented ignorance of those still watching shadows.
Exactly. The Buddhist path, on the other hand, while it values right view, a clear intellectual understanding, it focuses intensely on the Eightfold Path,
A system of engaged, continuous practice for ethical and mental development.
which ensures the knowledge is experiential, not just conceptual philosophy. The Eightfold Path is grouped into three trainings: wisdom, prajna, ethical conduct,
Yeah.
and mental development, samadhi.
Okay, let's break down those three sections.
The wisdom section includes right view, which is understanding the Four Noble Truths and reality as it is, and right intention, which is the commitment to ethical and mental self-improvement.
Then the ethical conduct section includes right speech,
No lying, harshness, slander, or idle chatter.
right action,
No harming, stealing, or sexual misconduct.
and right livelihood.
Earning a living without causing harm to others. And this is the foundation of external ethical behavior, but it stems from internal clarity.
And finally, the mental development section, which is critical for transforming the practitioner.
This includes right effort cultivating wholesome states and abandoning unwholesome ones, right mindfulness, and right concentration.
Let's return now to the application of this system in the therapeutic or professional world. Let's focus on how ethics and mindfulness act as these powerful self-correction tools.
We specifically highlighted right concentration, or samatha, because it fundamentally changes the practitioner's internal calculus. It involves developing meditative practice to achieve a one-pointedness of mind, a state of profound calm known as samadhi.
And what does that deep calm accomplish ethically?
It creates an internal ethical gauge that is far superior to any external rulebook. Any action that disrupts this deep calm or violates the practitioner's inner integrity becomes immediately and acutely uncomfortable.
So external behavior modification becomes irrelevant.
Completely. All action becomes self-correcting when it takes place outside the realm of comfort provided by right concentration.
The fear shifts from, will I be caught, to, will this rupture my internal state of peace?
Exactly. The ethical mandate is internalized. It's rooted in the state of being. It's similar to how Plato believed that seeing the form of the good fundamentally changes the quality of the soul. But here, the change comes from stillness, not pure intellect.
And the second crucial tool, right, mindfulness, or sati, acts as the ultimate anti-dogma safeguard in that therapeutic environment.
Right. Mindfulness involves constantly observing internal and external phenomena without judgment, without attachment.
And this directly addresses that ethical pitfall we discussed earlier, the practitioner needing to impose their own framework onto the client.
Absolutely. The goal is to listen without imposing conceptual models. The sources gave that visceral anecdote of the client who complained that their psychiatrist was trying to figure out what kind of peg I was and what hole I would fit into.
That's such a powerful metaphor for the boundary violation caused by professional dogma.
It is. The moment the professional stops listening authentically and starts analyzing just to confirm their pre-existing conceptual model, whether it's Freudian or behavioral or even a rigid Buddhist model, They are no longer serving the client's complex, shifting reality.
And right, mindfulness prevents this.
It patrols and limits that tendency to reformulate the client's experience to fit some neat, pre-existing paradigm. By staying in a state of alert, non-judgmental awareness, the practitioner creates a healing environment where they can genuinely listen and empower the client toward their own self-understanding.
They avoid rushing to a premature diagnosis or imposing services that are really rooted in their own ego needs.
So the genius of the Eightfold Path is that by providing these deep meditative and ethical tools, it ensures the practitioner is always engaged in that process of self-elimination. The ethical system demands the purification of motivation first.
And external ethical conduct then follows, naturally and effortlessly.
It confirms our initial hypothesis. If you are authentic in examining why you act, you will naturally stop being tempted to recommend procedures that fulfill your unexamined need for self-validation. It resolves the problem of the danger of altruism at its root.
What a journey. I mean, we've reconstructed Plato's absolute proof for the immortal soul and the rational structure of the cosmos.
Only to juxtapose it with the Buddha's radical denial of the fixed self and the flow state reality of Siddhartha.
The final synthesis remains distinct, yet there's a powerful resonance there. Plato validates the self and seeks eternal being as the source of truth and goodness. The soul has to participate in it.
And the Buddha denies the self and seeks unconditioned cessation, nirvana, as liberation from suffering. And that's achieved by understanding and ceasing to cling to the process of existence itself.
So one believes in the perfect eternal form that the self strives to ascend toward, grounding all ethics in a transcendent rational object.
And the other believes the perfect pattern is the process of existence itself, which is characterized by impermanence, and which is realized through disciplined, ethical, and mental practice.
Yet despite this massive metaphysical chasm, both traditions demand the same price.
Radical internal transformation, and the painful shattering of comfortable illusions. For Plato, it's the intellectual suffering of the philosopher climbing out of the cave. For the Buddha, it's the engaged, disciplined practice that extinguishes the inner fires of greed and ignorance.
And both offer the possibility of a timeless true knowledge.
They do.
And the connection to you, the listener, is the most important takeaway here. Both of these systems serve as powerful, detailed maps for escaping illusion in your own life.
Whether you are battling the shadow play of cultural opinions and sensory deceptions, Plato's cave, or the exhausting cycle of craving and attachment that drives suffering, Buddhism's samsara, these traditions provide comprehensive blueprints for waking up.
They both confirm that true knowledge is transformative and ethically essential. The enlightened individual, whether that's the philosopher king or the arahant, acts out of wisdom and compassion.
Understanding that their purified intention is the only source of genuine help they can possibly offer the world.
So we want to leave you with one final, provocative thought, and it's drawn directly from the practical application of the Buddhist ethical system.
If authentic ethical behavior should arise naturally from genuine self-understanding and purified intention, if it should just flow effortlessly, then reflect on your own motivations for the choices you're making today.
Are those choices being driven primarily by a desire to conform to external systems? Are you seeking approval, or just fearing the consequences of not conforming?
Or are they flowing from that deep calm and purified intention that's achieved through deliberate self-inquiry, ensuring that your actions serve the highest good for the client or the project or the community rather than your own unexamined ego needs?
The ability to act without being enslaved by our own shadows is the ultimate liberation offered by both East and West, and that is a deep dive worth taking every single day.